Is Canadian government secretly printing money without you ever knowing about it, or news channels not even covering that? Well, I'm going to cover it for you today and let's discuss it. Bank of Canada has just resumed the repo operation, which is called repurchased agreement. Basically, what it is in simple terms is it is a short-term loan. Imagine it as a pawn shop for Canadian banks, for like TD, CIBC, and RBC, when they can come to Bank of Canada and use MBSs, which is mortgage-backed securities, basically your mortgage loans, in exchange for cash. Now, that's how it works. It works only for 1 month. So whenever a bank is in trouble, they're like, hey, Mr. Bank of Canada, can I have some money? Here is that loan that James and and Williams have took last year. Well, can I get some cash in exchange for that loan? Now, is that a good news or is it a bad news? Well, let's talk about it. It's a short-term cash scheme that can actually translate into money printing quite fast. What they're doing is, so for example, I actually have notes here. I wrote some notes to discuss for you so I don't miss any point, because it's very important, because news channels, they do not want to cover this. It doesn't look good for Canadian economy. It doesn't look good for the politicians. I have seen no Canadian media covering this. So subscribe, follow, and hit that like button, guys, and leave some comments, please, because we need to grow this awareness among Canadians, what is actually happening behind the backs of all Canadians. Only the banks know, only the rich are getting richer, and the middle class is getting devastated. So don't forget to subscribe. Now, what does it mean? Using MBS, what do they use it? Well, to pay, they pay other banks. So why banks use it? Sometimes they use it to pay other banks. Why would they do that? Well, for example, if hypothetically TD doesn't like how CIBC, let's say, appraises their loans, they could have done it between each other, but they might know about something we do not know about the practices. I'm talking about like blanket appraisals. So, for example, there is a potential issue of all of those mortgages, especially in Toronto, when the market went down, that they have on paper more value than the property is actually worth at the current market situation. So the real estate, as you might have noticed in Toronto and a big city like that, went significantly down, and the property value is less a lot of times than the mortgage is in itself. So as a reasonable bank to another bank, I wouldn't give that money. However, the Bank of Canada could. So they could use that money basically to pay other banks, lend money to what repos are used for. Part number two, they could lend that money to you for a mortgage, or they could lend it to a business as well. And number three, it's basically gives extra cash to the bank. So if the banks are short on cash, they're short on loans, they can use those repos to increase the liquidity. Basically, I'm not going to be using complicated terms. Cash in a pocket that you can have for out-of-pocket spendings for a bank, or give back a loan that you borrowed from your friend. I mean, when TD Bank you got a loan from RBC and they need to cover it back, you can borrow from your parents, Bank of Canada, to give it back. Simple terms, not to overcomplicate things. But your parents are like, hey, you got to give it back to us in a month. However, there is also a rollover thing. So you could actually extend it for another month. Say, hey, mom, dad, I'll pay it a little bit later. Can I have another 1 month extension? So, and they're like, yeah, for a fee. So basically, that's how it works. You're borrowing money if you're a major Canadian bank from moms and pops to give it back in extent for a fee that can be extended, I don't know for how long. Potentially indefinitely, but hopefully not. Anyways, let's keep going. It's getting more interesting, right? I told you it's going to be really interesting. No news are going to be telling you that, because, well, doesn't look good for Canada, doesn't look good for us. What does it indicate for us? It indicates a stress in the system. It means it's a big problem that nobody wants to report to us, that the banks are short on cash. that there is a problem with the mortgage-backed securities, MBSs, that we do not have money, and the Bank of Canada has to come in, step in. Now, it's also what the other issue is that it's a risk transfer. So let's say MBS. So it's basically a sheet, like let's say a hypothetical electronic form of sheet. This is your mortgage paper you sign with your mortgage broker. Now, as a bank, you transfer it to the Bank of Canada, right? And that this paper is not worth what it is worth. So potentially it's not worth what it is on paper. Potentially that liability is higher. So you take it out from the bank and you transfer it to the Bank of Canada, to the taxpayers. So for you and me. So the risk goes on you and me, not from the bank that needs to make money. Potentially, if that mortgage was to default, it's not their problem. Okay. And then also, it can also be an indicator of propping up the housing market. As we know, we have a big problem with mortgages, people insolvencies and other things going on. So people cannot pay for their mortgages. It could prop up the housing market because it's going down. It is a very interesting situation right now. Why would they want to make the housing more expensive? That's a question for you. Another one is, you have to remember that this is covered by CMHC. So those mortgage-backed securities that they're given to the Bank of Canada, they could be inflated. They could be, you know what, guys, it's pretty crazy. I'm even talking to you about that. So they do use this term as blanket appraisals in many banks. So what they do is they just blanketly appraise the house in value, and they say, well, this is what the house is worth, this is what the mortgage worth is, without actually doing the proper appraisal. And interestingly enough, that Bank of Canada would accept those appraisals, and they would give them a loan for that. So literally that could be inflated papers that are not worth, like we could be actually heading into financial crisis right now, to the Bank of Canada, but they are backed by CMHC. It's a government. So basically, taxpayers' money, in case the people who are paying for those mortgages that are bad mortgages are put on taxpayers' shoulders. So if they don't pay, it is going to be paid out by CMHC, which is going to be paid by our tax dollars. Yes, you're welcome. Crazy, right? Now, also, it could be an indicator of stealth money printing. Increasing the liquidity and amount of money in the economy can spike up inflation a little bit. It could be as a tactic to print money without actually printing money. Now, it is a very interesting topic. It's a mom and pop's operation going on higher ups between big players like banks. Nobody is talking about it. I wonder why. Why are they not talking about it? Why do no politicians or news channels want to even talk about it when it's all on the Government of Canada website? That's a big news. Now, the thing is, what are the main questions I have for you, my dear audience? And I want you to ask it yourself, and maybe you can help me answer them. So basically, why not accept federal debt as a collateral? Why are we going and basically mortgage-backed securities? Why are we propping up the housing market specifically? What are we going to be doing about the rollovers? That short term, the government might argue it's a short term loan for 1 month, but why do they get extensions? How many extensions can they have on that? And also, why now? That's the biggest question. Why did it just happen in secrecy, without news coverage, without much information? The Government of Canada just published on their website, while we are talking about Americans and Donald Trump situation, rather than focusing on what's going on here. And also, it's also, does it mean that mortgage-backed securities look weak? Mortgages are getting weak. Are we on a are we going into recession? Basically it's bailing out. Basically, in the long term, is Government of Canada. Okay, let me paraphrase it in another way. I don't want to make it too complicated. Simple language. I'll make it simple. Is Government of Canada trying to bail out the banks that have got themselves into overinflated mortgages by having so many mortgages that are, especially in Toronto, where people took more loans, higher debt than the current property value if they were to sell. Is the government of Canada trying to bail out banks from those bad mortgages that they got into and put it back on the tax shoulders? That's the question that I have for you guys. Thank you for watching. I'll leave a news article for you to read in the description of this video. And yeah, this is not a good news, honestly, but I covered it. See you next video.